Hey family, welcome to We All Need Each Other, the podcast from Transformation Ministries. Let me tell you some facts. Each one of us has unique ways of thinking, gifts, talents, and experiences. Each one of us was made in the image of God. Although those things are very real and very true, it is also true that we reflect the image of God very differently. When we come together with our differences and our uniqueness, we can help each other. We can help each other understand different perspectives and broaden our own perspectives. We can help each other grow and learn and understand the beauty of God and also the complexity of this world. That's why we wanted to bring you this podcast. In this podcast, we're going to get real. We're going to bring in guests that talk about things like faith, race, politics, relationships, ministry, and justice. With all that being said, I just want to say thank you for being here. And thank you for joining us on We All Need Each Other.
Allie, thanks so much for being here today. We're so excited and honored to get to talk to you today. You're a big deal around transformation.
That's right.
And if I'm sure most people know who you are, but if there's somebody out there who doesn't, would you take a few minutes and just introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, my name is Lantz, and I'm married to Kory. And so we have 4 kids. We have 3 girls and a boy. We have Avery, who's 9, and Raylan, who's 5, and then Kaya is 2, and Micah was just born, so he's 5 months. So they keep us busy. I'm homeschooling them, so I'm a stay-at-home mom, but we have a cool setup. It's a hybrid. They go to school 2 days a week. They're home 3 days a week. So that's kind of been my role, which has been hard in some ways because, before they were born, I was full on in transformation and with Kory, and we've kind of shifted a little bit where I stay at home with them, but obviously very present here at Transformation, which started, it's crazy to think, 12 years ago. So it was 12 years ago. Kory and I just moved into a neighborhood and felt like, we knew there was kind of 3 things, right? When we moved into the neighborhood, we felt God was calling us to, and it was youth and culture and hospitality. And so we just dove in that way, and we wanted to be with middle schoolers and high schoolers. And it was easy with culture because we were into a neighborhood that was mostly African-American and some Hispanic and some white people too. And so it was great because that was a part of what we felt like God was calling us to. And then hospitality, we just opened our doors. And kind of from that, Iron Sharpen Iron, the program that we have now developed, which is really cool to see how it's grown. When we first started, we didn't really know what it would look like. We were just trying to hang with kids and be faithful to that, but it's cool how God has used it and still going today. So.
Yeah. So you mentioned like when it first started, it wasn't what it is now.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we want to talk about today.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about how we can get more people involved here, but also just connect people to the city, which is part of our mission statement now. But what was the mission when you and Kory first started Transformation Ministries?
It was, we just wanted to transform the hearts and minds of urban youth. And that was really it when we first started. We were just in the neighborhood. We were focused on the kids. And that was our main focus. It was like, God has called us. He's given us abundant life. We want this abundant life for these youth, middle school, high school kids. And we focused in and zeroed in on that so much. And it was really, I'd say our first year was really chaotic. Like it was crazy. We were getting used to things. We were kind of in culture shock in some ways of learning things and growing. There was a lot of times where, the first year we didn't have a ton of rules set up or we didn't really know what we were doing. And so we learned after that year to kind of put some boundaries around it and say, like, you can only apply, you have to apply to be a part of this program. Right? You can. And so it was it was really, we learned a lot, and we loved focusing on the youth. But then slowly we realized, their siblings would say, hey, what about us? Like, can we do this? And then the parents were kind of like, hey, are we going to get, and so it just was cool how God took that and then developed what it is today.
Yeah. So talking about like developing into what it is today, like, I guess talk through that transition to like what the mission is now, and sort of as briefly as you can, describe 12 years of a transition of something like this. Like, what has that process been like? And so then how do we get to where the mission is today?
Yeah, so early on, like the first few years, it was just Kory and I, and we were just getting a little bit burnt out. We were trying to run this program out of our home, and what was happening is it was like we'd drive around the city and we'd pick everybody up, and then we'd come back to our house, and then we'd make them all dinner, and then we'd eat our meal together, and then we would lead what we called Real Talk, and it was just kind of questions and asking kids about the Bible or what they thought in life. We led that, and then we'd pack all up, and a lot of times we would try to help them with their homework, and then we'd go from that, and then it was like, okay, now we're going to drive them all home. And so those days, and then more kids wanted to be a part of it, but we really felt passionate about keeping it at 12 kids, so then we started it on another night. And then it was like the in-between, right, of going to their sporting events, and it just felt like that was the first couple years, and it felt overwhelming, and we were getting burnt out, and it was a lot. And I remember sitting in a coffee shop with someone that mentored us, and he said, do you guys want to grow? And we were thinking, yeah, I mean, more kids want to do this. We do want to grow. And he's like, you need help. You need some people to help you, come alongside you, volunteers. And I remember being really nervous about that thought, thinking, what does that mean? There is a culture to bridge that cultural gap. And I was nervous for both sides. I was nervous for the kids. I was like, I don't want just a bunch of volunteers to come in and not to feel safe, or I want them to feel, but then I also was nervous for the volunteers coming in thinking, what if like a kid has a bad day and like, maybe explodes in their behavior or something, and then it was just very, and I remember, he had his hands shut tight. He's like, you can do this with it, if you just want to control it, or you can let it go. And I remember thinking, we need to let it go. So brought in volunteers, brought in a food team. There was a couple that cooked for 3 years for us. I mean, they just came every week, and then they got burnt out. So then we realized we need more food teams. And then we got mentors. So we got one-on-one mentors for each kid to have their own person that could stay on top of their homework, could go to their sporting events. It wasn't just on Kory and Allie, and it was this team. And then we actually got another couple to lead the other group, so another team leader. So it just felt like we could breathe, and ministry was happening, and it was awesome. And I think the coolest thing that came out of it was we saw how the people that were getting involved, they were loving it, and they were being impacted by the kids. And so all these conversations would come up about race or justice or these things of like, well, now why doesn't this kid have that? Or like, how come this kid told me this happened at school and this? And it was so good to have those conversations because they had context for them. They weren't happening outside of the ministry where it was like, I want to talk about race, but I don't know anyone of a different race.
It's this theoretical thing. Yes.
Yeah. And so the conversations were beautiful because they had relationships with the kids, cared about the kids. They understood. It was really good conversation. And I remember Kory and I thinking, this is awesome. Yeah. Like what's taking place is really cool.
So the mission statement as it stands now is seeking to transform the hearts and minds of youth and their families while connecting others to the city in a positive way. So can you just talk a little bit more about the second part, connecting others to the city in a positive way? What's that look like, and why is that important? Why did you guys include that? Why is that part of the mission statement?
Yes, it's become a huge value and a huge part of it. I would say equal parts even, because I remember when we'd first get people that were thinking about mentoring, my first, the first 5 years, I would say, hey, we really need you to come mentor and pour into this student. And now my language has shifted, and if someone's interested in mentoring, I'm saying, hey, like, this would be good opportunity for you. You know, like, this would actually be really cool for you personally to grow and see where God takes it. So yes, I think we're really passionate too about the word positive. I think that people are connected to this city in ways, I think some of their only connections are maybe what they hear on the news or what they see in movies or TV, and that's usually a negative way that they're connected. And so Kory and I and all of the staff at Transformation are super passionate about breaking that down and saying, no, connecting them in a positive way. Because I think there's a lot of, the movies project a lot of negativity and fear. And I still remember the one time, like way back in the first year, a church brought their youth group up. And I still remember one of the kids was like, this is the inner city, like, this is the city. And I thought, yeah, this is our neighborhood. He's like, this is great, like, this isn't scary, this isn't bad, this is really cool. And I thought, yeah, this is what it is. It's homes and people, and it's not what you think of. And so that was huge for us, is this, you know, the glory of God is here on display in so many hundreds of ways. And Dan, I know you guys both know this too. It's like, this is what our heart is, to connect people to this. And I'll never forget, a couple years ago, this story maybe kind of explains it, is so a few years ago, the house right next door to us, there was a shooting that went on. And it was kind of an intense one. It was like there were 10 shots that went through the front of the house, and someone inside was injured. So it was a big deal, and it was a big deal on our street. I mean, people were shaken up by it. Our neighbors were very upset about what took place. You know, it wasn't just like, oh, no big deal. It was really hard for people and our neighbors. And so when that happened, I still remember the news reporters coming. And I was out on my porch when they were there, and it was in the dark, and they came, and the way that it just was, even, here we are on Cushing Street, you know, just the way it was done. And I was watching it thinking, you know, this is interesting. Well, then my daughter saw on TV, we were sitting in the living room, she saw the news report, and she was 7 at this time. And I remember her like, wait, that's Leah's house, you know, like, this is literally my friend's house, and why does it look so scary, and why is it so dark, and why is it, and I was just like, yeah, isn't that crazy how the news can make things look like that? And she was like, why didn't the news come when we had our lemonade stand? And all the kids had made jewelry bracelets, they had and they were selling them, and this was, you know, it was sunny and it was nice outside, and people, like, the whole neighborhood was bustling with people and adults coming out to buy the kids lemonade. And my daughter was just like, where was the news then? And I thought, yeah, that is unfortunate that people aren't seeing that side of, like, our street and our neighborhood. And so I think going back to what you said, Dan, of like connecting people in a positive way, wanting them to come up and realize, like, wow, the city's a place to run to, not a place to run away from. Like, the city is where it's at, with like amazing perspectives on life and people that have stories that are worth hearing, and it will affect me to hear their stories. So
I'd be interested in hearing more about like how that has affected you, because even as you're talking, I'm thinking back to, you know, I've talked about this on the podcast before, of like, I'm born and raised here in the South Bend area, and I think back to the ways, like, growing up, we would talk about like the Lincoln Way corridor, right, going to the airport, and just sometimes saying, oh, you know, it's not that's kind of, you know, not the greatest area, or, you know, you'd use phrases like that, and then you start to meet people and actually, you know, get to know people that live there or like spend time there, and you're like, that was a really harmful way to kind of talk. So I've definitely had this progression of like learning a lot about that. What has that been like for you, maybe like in the 12 years of and I even think too of like an episode we had Kory on with Jonathan Brooks, like in Jonathan's book, he talks about like, there are no God-forsaken places, there are only church-forsaken places, like this idea, like, has that been something that you had like 12 years ago from the start, or has this been a kind of a progression for you, and like How have you and Kory been impacted by this?
Yes. I would say when I first moved in, I definitely had some fears of, whoa, okay, we're going to live here and do that. And then it's so funny because once you become familiar and you know your neighbors, you're like, this is not at all scary. I have one where we live now. We have a house across the street that, always has some action going on. And there's always just lots going on there. And there's always this group of guys that they kind of are on the porch and they're always talking, even late at night, they're always out there talking to each other. And it's like, if anyone else would drive by, I think they would be, wait, what? I'm scared. Well, it's so funny because as soon as I pull in my driveway, I open the door, the guy who lives there, he always says, hey fam. And he's like, can I help you? Because he's seen me load out 4 children.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's just kind of I feel like it encompasses what we're talking about is, at first when you don't maybe know somebody, it can feel scary or unsure. But I feel so safe in my neighborhood because if anything goes down, the first people I want around me are my neighbors. And they're the ones that they look out for our house like nobody's business. I mean, they are coming over saying, hey, I saw this person on your porch, didn't know who they were. I saw that, they're... And so I think there is this level of, if you don't, know the place, know the people, anything unknown feels uncertain. But as soon as you build those relationships, I mean, Dan, with Eyesign Moms, at first, I'm sure there was like some discomfort, like, what am I going to connect with? With someone that has such a different, life, and then it's like, they're some of your closest friends. And so it's just really cool how that happens.
Yeah. There's a story that I like to share with people, and I've shared it in several places, but I remember one time I was maybe like a year into working here at Transformation, and I actually pulled out onto Lincoln Way, like you were talking about, and I saw this guy walking down the street, just a random guy. It was middle of the day, and it was probably 20 to 30 something black man. He had dreads or braids, so longer hair, wearing jean shorts that were kind of saggy, and a plain white t-shirt, and probably some shoes like I have on now, like some white maybe Jordans or some kind of Nikes. And for whatever reason, I remember thinking in my mind, that guy's probably up to no good. And then I caught myself and I was like, wait a minute. All I know about this guy is what he looks like, what he's choosing to wear, and where he's walking. And then I thought, that could be any of the Eyesign kids wearing the exact same stuff, walking the exact same street, time of day. And I know that they're good kids. So why would I think that? And it's that once you have that proximity, it kind of opens your eyes to like, wait a minute, I've believed all these things about people without ever knowing them. That's just a huge... it's a huge learning opportunity when you get to spend time with people who aren't like you, who didn't grow up like you, in places that you don't know yet.
It reminds me of that quote that I know you guys say around here a lot is distance creates distortion, and then proximity creates compassion. When you're close to people, you have compassion, and when you're distant, it's all distorted and you're coming up with narratives that aren't true. But similar experience. There was a boy, this was like the first couple years, and his name was Trey, and we got to love him, know him. I mean, he would come over and hold Avery when she was a baby. I mean, it was really sweet because he was really loved babies. And then I saw there's kind of, a couple months went by, he was involved in just a really confusing thing. Because I think teenagers, like when we were teenagers, right, we were confused about life at times and made bad choices. And so the things that they're confronted with are maybe not the things that I didn't have. Like, I wasn't confronted with those choices to make, but he got involved in kind of a messy situation. And I know there was like a gun involved and some things that went down. Well, then later, a couple months later, I saw his face. It was like he was arrested for something, and his mugshot, came up on the TV. And I remember thinking, like, I saw it on the TV thinking that's Trey. Like, he's held my kid before. He's a family. It feels like family. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, all the times that I have seen mugshots, like of on the TV, I have thought, oh, well, they're like when I was a kid, oh, those are bad, like people or criminal, there's something bad there. And then when it was someone I knew and loved, I realized, oh, these are people with stories and families, and just because they were involved in a messy situation, it really hit home, like a similar thing.
I just wanted to pause right here and say thank you. Thank you for joining us and being here with us on the We All Need Each Other podcast. If you want to support us, please don't hesitate to stop by our website, www.transformation58.com/give. Thanks. We all need each other.
So I feel like there's a next step to this progression that we haven't really talked about yet, but like, you know, everybody listening to this podcast is not going to be able to do what you and Kory did, right? And like start this ministry in a neighborhood, you know, like that's just, that's your story, and it's a really powerful story, but not everybody's going to be able to do that.
Right.
But we all have this opportunity to, you know, connect with people that we're in close proximity to. But I want to even go a step farther than that of like, we can't be in close proximity to everybody, right? Like that's just not possible. So like, how does somebody develop this, I guess I'll call empathy is really what it is, of the next time they see a mugshot on the TV, not having that thought come to their mind, even if it's not somebody, you know, that they're not in close proximity to, right? You get what I'm saying? Like we just, so good. We can't all be in that proximity. So like, how do we develop that empathy for people?
That is so good. I think, a lot of it is just whoever is in front of you, because I have kind of had that feeling as a stay-at-home mom now. I'm like, I can't do it all, and I don't even know all the kids in Eyesign now. It just feels really overwhelming of like, I even sometimes when I come to the building, I'm just so overwhelmed. I'm like, I don't even know where to begin. And God always reminds me, begin with whoever is like right in front of you. You know, just right in front of your face, whether that's your children or whether that's, you know, I have one student that I mentored her in the past, and she always comes up to me. I'm like, okay, this is my person. And like Mother Teresa, right? Like feeding one, or she has a quote about do the small thing right in front of you. And you don't have to feed hundreds, just feed one, something like that. And so it's like, okay, in whatever neighborhood you live in, there's neighbors right across the street. And if you live in the country, then I've even been challenged of, okay, when I'm out getting groceries, which sometimes I order them now, but whoever I'm in front of that day, whether it be anybody I'm coming into contact to, trying to think of them as like a human being person, right? Really like a lot of times too, I'm thinking like, what's their story? You know, what are they going through? They woke up and probably had a hard day, just like I woke up and had, you know, like what can we relate on? What can we find together that as human beings we're connected, and how can we connect over that, I guess. But
so as you guys have tried to bring people along along the journey, connect people to the city, what are the obstacles that you've seen in people's lives of making it hard to make connections, or even taking the first step to come close and be in proximity? What are the obstacles that you've seen?
Yes, I have seen, and some of them, honestly, all of them I had to go through too. So this isn't like Kory and Allie not experiencing them or whoever. I mean, I know you, Dan, had to go through them too. I think everyone has to go through them. And that's probably the first thing that we feel like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. So maybe I shouldn't connect, because I think one of the main ones is fear, which we kind of talked about. Is I know a lot of times because of the misconceptions or because of what we think of when we think of this city, there's a fear of, well, is this safe, or am I going to be okay? I know some mentors we have, they were nervous to drive kids around, or and so I think fear is a big one. And then I think another one is discomfort. It's super uncomfortable to cross a culture, or just to even be in a space. I know one mentor comes to my mind that he was really uncomfortable to do it. And it's so cool because I have seen how the kids have made him almost like more comfortable with who he is. Wow. So it's like, I think at first, you know, you come and you're in this space where, like, the first time I remember talking to a girl, she was like, your shirt's ugly. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, I don't even know how to respond to that. But then it was like, over time, I realized, wow, like, the African American culture as a whole is really real, and really honest and really like comfortable with themselves, and the white culture isn't as much. And so I realized like this is awesome because it's helping me be comfortable with myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the students have taught me that. So now I can come in just as Allie and I can wear my ugly shirt and say, it is kind of an ugly shirt, and that's okay. You still love me.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I've seen mentors come in nervous and uncomfortable, and then a couple months in, it's like they can take a deep breath because the students have really taught them, hey, I don't care if you're white. I don't care if you're older, if you're 80. I don't care if you're 20. They don't care.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone just takes a deep breath and is like, I'm welcome here. And I love how the students do that to volunteers. There's been really cool connections with 70-year-old mentors, you know, and so that was one thing. The discomfort is like getting through that hurdle. So fear, discomfort, and then I think judgment is an obstacle where it's easy to make judgment calls. It's easy to when others are coming in to say, you know, you're doing that wrong, or, you know, your parents aren't making good choices in that way, and just to judge. There's a quote by who we love, Greg Boyle, where he says, we need to be in awe of what like under-resourced people are carrying. We need to be in awe of that instead of stand in judgment to how they're carrying it. And that really affected me of, we need to be in awe of all the things going on. And so I think instead of pointing fingers and saying, you know, you're not doing this right, you're not making these right choices. And so as we look at obstacles, I think fear, discomfort, and judgment are ones that come to my mind. But those break down really quickly. Like once you step in and you realize, oh, I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to be uncomfortable. And my judgments aren't right, you know, or they aren't always right. And then the big one is coming in and thinking like, I am here to help them. And kind of this idea of the savior complex of, you know, I'm going to be involved and I'm going to connect to this ministry because I have something to give them. And I think that's a huge obstacle when we see people kind of come in with that mindset. But I came in with that mindset. I think I think it's just the water we're swimming in at first. And so that breaks down quickly too, when you realize, oh, I was here to give and now I'm here to receive. And so that's a really cool thing. I mean, it starts as an obstacle because it can get, you know, messy, but then I think as soon as you're here for a while, you realize, oh, this is about me growing. You know, we all, like this podcast, we all need each other. And so it breaks down pretty quickly too.
And that's, I guess I would say one reason I love the fact that like the current mission focuses on this idea of connections, right? Because if you're really gonna make a connection, that's not like a one-way street. You know, that's two people, two something coming together. You know, and there's sort of a partnership there. Like they're both bringing something to the table. So I'd be interested, like looking back over the 12 years, you know, what is it like to see all these connections that are being made that like started from, you know, just those initial, you know, 12-person meetings and those initial conversations, where now I'm sure these connections that are being made that were just beyond what you and Kory even thought in the beginning, right? Like what does that feel like now to see that?
It is one of my greatest joys to walk in. And I love the unlikely connections where you have this businessman, you know, that is coming from Notre Dame or something, and then you have a student, you know, like a 6th grade boy, and they are just bonded at the hip, and the kid adores the mentor, and the mentor adores this boy and has gotten to know the family and is really good friends with the mom, and like you see them come to family dinner and they're just loving life together, and you're like, this is amazing. I know one family, it was actually the mentor I talked about earlier that was super nervous and uncomfortable, and he did it, and now he and his whole family have moved up to South Bend because they love their mentee that much. I mean, it was amazing to watch because he was super scared at first to dive in, and the connection that he and his mentee made, and then the way his wife and their girls connected, and they'd be at this boys' sporting events. I mean, they wouldn't miss one. And the way that they would talk about this student, I mean, the deep love for his whole family. And they just kept saying, you know, they lived out in Wakarusa, and they were like, we just want to move to South Bend to be close to their family. We just want to, and they did. And so those are the things, you know, when that mentee was going through really hard things and he lost his granny, I saw the mentors at the funeral. But then when I went to that their daughter's birthday party, I saw the mentee and his siblings at the party. And I'm like, that is what, I just love that. And I love the way that it's really a family. I mean, we say that a lot around here, we are family. And that's my favorite positive connections, where these mentors and the mentee come together, and there's just such deep love and respect for one another. And the whole family is, I mean, even I think of like the race circles that have been going on here, where they're intentional about bringing like men, women, black and white, like just a diverse group to really talk about some of the things going on in our world. And that becomes like a tight-knit group. And so that's been some really positive ways that we've seen connection build. There's just really, really cool things. It's so, when I see it, I'm like, this is the gospel. This is God. This is God at work. This is just God all over it, to just unify his people and bring us together as one family. It's really cool.
It makes me emotional to think about some of those stories that you're sharing. And you mentioned the Eyesign Moms earlier.
Yes.
I might start crying, but like, I remember thinking, just like you said, like, I'm not going to have there's going to be no like connecting points with these people, because our lives are so different.
Yeah.
And now there's one mom in particular that, man, every time I see her, I give her a huge hug.
Yes.
And I feel like she's just pouring into me as a dad, as someone who works here at Transformation, as someone who wants to be aware of current events and understand like the cultural gaps that exist. Yeah. She's amazing.
Yes.
And she calls me for help too.
Yes.
So that's the thing, like there's a mutuality, right?
Yes.
There's this give and take. Yeah. We're both gaining, we're both giving.
Yes.
It's so amazing.
Yes, and same. We went through one of a really hard time with when our daughter was kind of going through some stuff, and it was not really a diagnosis, but it was a physical thing that was starting to happen, and we were like, man, we just need to pray over her. And Kory was like, I'm calling the Eyesign Moms. And it was just like, that was our go-to. Like just the faithful women of God and their prayer, we wanted their prayers. And it was like, they came immediately to our mind. When our kid's going through something hard, we want them there. You know, when we went through another hard thing where we lost a pregnancy, and it was an ISI boy who was the first person to give Kory a big hug, and he said, I'm sorry. And we were just, it's like, yes, it's that thing of, sometimes when something's hard going on at home, I mean, I run over to my neighbor's house, and Denise is the first person I want to talk to about, you know, it's just like that. That is what I think God talks about, and what Jesus talks about when he says, love your neighbor. It's not you love your neighbor so that you feel good about yourself. It's love your neighbor because your neighbor's going to love you back, and you actually need your neighbor. And so this is the beautiful thing that, you know, called you to.
I think it's this connection that like we never knew we needed until we had it.
Yes.
And that makes me, so what I would love to have you share about is, if there's someone who just doesn't get this, just is like, why does it matter like where I serve, where I connect, who I spend my time with, what's the difference between the city and where I live?
Yes.
Why do I need to cross cultural lines?
Yes.
If there's someone who's just not getting it, not seeing the value that we're seeing, what would you say to that person? Like, what's the, like, make the case, I guess, why we all do need each other?
Yes. Oh man, I would say I kind of felt like my relationship with God was two-dimensional before moving here, and there were things that I would read the Bible and it would kind of be like, that doesn't maybe quite make sense, or I don't know if that's cool, but I'm maybe not experiencing it. Anyways, when I moved here and started, it was like my walk with God became 3-dimensional. It was just like this whole other dimension that I was missing that felt like, oh my goodness, I am getting the full picture of God. And when I didn't have that diversity in my life or those other perspectives, and I loved God, I served him, I was going to church, I was reading my Bible daily, but it still was 2-dimensional. And now it's like there's parts of scripture that come alive to me because I'm like, oh wow, this is what he's talking about. Or, so much of the Bible is written from an oppressive standpoint, right? Where people are being oppressed. And so when you have people in your life that are being oppressed from, like our society, it's like they speak into things that it's like your eyes are open for the first time. It's like the light bulb goes off and you're just in awe of how they have understood God. And it's like you're getting the full picture of God. And you just, isn't it just like there's a piece of your life that's just missing and you're like, I never want to go back. Yeah, sure, it's messy, sure, it's hard, and it really does wreck you in a lot of ways, but I never want to go back to like a 2-dimensional life and a 2-dimensional heart. And so I would say that to be here, it really is more about you than about the people here. So Kory and I, when we were first here, the church would ask us like, how many people have been saved? And Kory was always like, man, he just started answering everyone. He would email back and say 2. And I was like, what 2 are you talking about? He's like, you and I. He's like, Kory and Allie have been saved. Because, and that's where I feel, where it's like, us moving here, it was in a lot of ways like we were the people that were impacted. And sure, yes, there's been impact, but I feel it the most in my own life in a lot of ways. And so I guess to the person that is saying, do I really need to do that for your own sake, for your own personal growth, for your own relationship with God? And then watch how when you say yes, God just blows it, And that's what I love. It's like the more I say yes to God, the more and more it just, wow, I'm in amazement. And I've seen that it's cool to not just have that happen to me, but to see with so many of my friends, so many of my family members, even Kory and I's own family members that have dove in. They're so blessed. And it's like, this is a pattern that I'm seeing, that everyone that jumps in to this city and to things that are going on, it's a cycle now that you start to see God do it in all of our hearts. So.
Hey everybody, I want to invite you to join me for 4 nights in January to study and discuss a new book by Dominique Du Bois-Gilliard called Subversive Witness, Scripture's Call to Leverage Privilege. We'll discuss what privilege is and how it has power in our lives. We'll look at many examples of biblical characters who had privilege and used it to subvert systems of power in order to uplift vulnerable people. We'll learn from each other's perspectives, and together we'll become more faithful livers and sharers of the good news of Jesus Christ. This study group will meet on the first 4 Monday nights of January 2022. We'll meet at the Transformation Center from 7 to 9 p.m. each night, with an optional free dinner from 6 to 7 p.m. There's no cost to join the study group, but you are responsible to get your own copy of the book. If you're interested in joining the Subversive Witness book study in January, please RSVP by Monday, December 27th. Thanks. I hope to see a lot of you there.
Could you share, and I know you've shared a few things already, but maybe share a little bit more about that idea of like that you kind of like, what are some practical ways like you and Kory feel like you were impacted through this process? And because I do think that's so important, because it is easy for us to just think, okay, yeah, I'm gonna dive into this ministry, or I'm gonna go do this thing because I feel like I'm giving something to other people. It's like this top-down approach, but like, what go a little bit deeper, I guess, into like how you and Kory have really gotten more out of it in some ways, you know, because of the ways you've been impacted.
Yes. Yeah. Oh man. Oh, so many. I mean, I think of some early on, just, I feel like in a lot of ways, I grew up so differently that it was like I was able to see all of the things that were going on that I was maybe blinded to, and like things on race and things on justice and things of like, whoa, this world is a lot bigger than what I have realized. And so what does that mean for my relationship with others, my relationship with God? And there's just some kids in particularly that they would say things that Kory and I were like, what? Like, what did that even mean? Like, I think of Malachi, one of their students, and he would just say, you know, hey, Kory, like, you're telling me these things, you're telling me that I can do these things, but like, I'm Black and that means something. And you're like, what does it mean? Like, and just started on this journey of like, whoa, like this being Black in America, like it does mean something. And having eyes opened to that has impacted us greatly. Another way, I remember sitting in Real Talks, and sometimes it was like, those were the places that my faith, I would do a lot of wrestling with, like, because we'd ask a question and then kids would just open up and share. And I was finding a lot of my own healing as they were processing some of their things. I was realizing some of my own stuff, and it was just like hearing them and watching them process through their stuff. We really went through on some journeys together of coming to healing places together. And I think that it's just really cool when you start off thinking, I don't have much in common with them. But then you get to deeper places and you're like, oh, wait, we have so much in common. We're both people in a broken world on this journey towards God. And then like everything. So, I mean, I think of students that have, if I'm sharing, like, I'm worried, it's like maybe we're not worried about the same things. Maybe they're worried about other things that I'm not having to worry about, but we're both worried. Yeah. And so then the students, they'd text me, you know, hey, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying. Like, we're both trying to memorize this verse on worry. It's like, I've just been able to be so blessed by, we can find commonality with anybody. Yeah. And so we're on this journey together. It's not, you know, it's not top down. It's like we're both walking through life. And so the ways of, yes, race, I've seen that's totally wrecked Kory and I. And just the ways that we've been able to see our own, like, humanness and walk alongside them has been really, really, really cool. I mean, even like I think of the moms and the Eyesign Moms in my own parenting journey, they've given me so much, oh my goodness, just gold of, as I'm walking as a parent, they're really mentoring me through the process. And I go to them so quickly of things that I'm needing or wanting advice on. So, man, I feel like a totally different person since moving here and doing life here. It's really, I think that when I first lived here, I remember thinking, man, it was almost like, oh, I wish I could raise my kids in the suburbs for these like comfortable reasons. And I drive back to my house and be like, but you know, I'm here because God's called us, and just gotta kind of, and then I'm like, now I'm like, oh, I don't want that, because I want what God has for me. And I've grown to love this place so much because it is uncomfortable and it's like right in front of your face every day. You're like, I have to deal with this. And so it's allowed me to be like, this is what God has for us, and this is what I actually want that now. I don't, like, the early years it was like, this is what God has for us, and I'm rubbing up against it and wishing I could be more comfortable. And now it's like, oh, I actually want the discomfort because that brings me closer to God. Yeah,
it's so cool because I feel like we keep hearing some similar themes come out in a lot of the conversations we're doing. In what you're saying, I hear, you know, a couple episodes ago, we talked with Shannon Martin.
Oh yeah,
and
I listened to that one.
And she talked about this idea of being needy, right, in relationships, of like being willing to be needy. and kind of put your need out there, and that being a very humble place. Because I feel like for some people, maybe, as we're talking and hearing, like, okay, if you're saying, like, what can I get out of this relationship, almost feels like a prideful place to be, but that's not what I hear you saying. What I hear you saying is you're coming to these places and showing up and being needy and coming from that humble place, and you're realizing, oh, I'm getting a lot out of it. Like, that's just organically happening. It's not like you're coming to these in a transactional way, if that makes sense. It's just like, that's life. That's what happens when you show up and live in a place. And I just think that's really cool.
Yes, that's exactly right. This idea of, we're all needy.
Yeah.
And let's connect over our need.
Yeah.
And then let's do this life together.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. See, you should have just answered that for me. That's exactly what makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So Aaron's going to get the last question, but I just want to say, I'm just really thankful for you guys, you and Kory and your kids. You guys, I think, really embody a lot of the values that we talk about here a lot. Yeah. And the one that I think of most is kinship. Yes. I think that you've found kinship here in an unlikely place, but then you're also offering kinship to so many people, whether that's through just being good neighbors. Or showing up needy to your neighbors, you know, when the guy says, hey, can I help you? You know, things like that. But also the way you brought other people along on the journey. Like, you didn't have to do that. You could have just kept it small, you know, controlled everything and done it your way. But you would have, not only you probably wouldn't have been following God's plan for this place, but you also would have maybe, you know, prevented other people from discovering some amazing. I know I'm one of those people. I mean, I remember playing basketball with Kory at the court on Monday nights and being like, I want to work here someday.
That's right.
Because I would show up and I would see the energy and the vibe and the fun and the silliness, but also like the deep connection that was happening, and I was just drawn to it. And you're right, it happens over and over and over and over again. Not every mentor who signs up to be a mentor walks away going, gosh, I love that place. But a lot of them do. A lot of them make these deep connections that are just life-changing. And you guys share that with other people. And so I'm really thankful. And you're a good example because you've also remained really faithful to God. You're so faithful. And you're so dependent on God. And your discipleship has just taken step after step after step. And like you said, like, you're living a 3D faith, a 3D relationship with God now, where before it was 2D. And it's more complex and it's more beautiful, and it's something that I never knew that I needed. But now I can't imagine life without it. So I'm just thankful for you guys.
Feel so similarly about the 3D life, and I just don't want to go back, even though before it was maybe comfortable. But it's just
and genuine. Before it was genuine. It's always been genuine. And it's real. And it's meaningful. But there's more.
There's more. And I was a part of a group, and I remember, some friends from college, and I remember them kind of being like, man, is this all there is? And there's a lot of people deconstructing their faith right now. And I just think, this is not all there is. Like, there's a piece of our faith that we're missing because we're not throwing ourselves in these uncomfortable places and following God. Like, God is the biggest adventure that I've ever been on. I mean, when people say following God is boring, I'm like, you're not following God then. Because it is a ride of constant Him calling you to something that you don't feel equipped for. And you still show up, and then He somehow does it. And you're just like, I'm amazed because I'm just a little weak person, and I just showed up, and then you actually used what I gave. I don't know how you did that, And so I'm thinking, man, to the person that's like following God, saying, is this all there is? Is this? No, it's not. It is a very much a 3-dimensional way of following Him that feels like an adventure.
And it even makes me wonder, like, what else is there? Why stop here? Like, this is so good. But if that one little step of walking into an uncomfortable place opened up all of this, like, what more is there? God is so big.
So big.
Yeah.
And I just want more of it.
Yes.
So,
yeah. One of my favorite quotes about faith is from Father Richard Rohr. He talks about like God. It's not that God is unknowable. It's that He's infinitely knowable. It's like the more that you learn about Him, the more there is to learn. Right.
Yes.
It's not like just this mystery that we can't know. It's that we're always going to be finding out more. And I think that 3D metaphor is so great for that. Yeah. Yes. Because it's like, yeah, the more you live into it, the more you're gonna find out. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we do have our question that we always come back to. I love hearing about what fascinates people, and so I'd be interested. Like, and again, you can take this wherever you want, but just right now, what's something that's fascinating you?
I love that question because it's a curious question, right?
Exactly.
And
yeah.
I love people that are curious about one another. Just wanting to know people. And I knew that this was coming because I had listened to other podcasts. So I was actually telling Kory last night, I'm like, man, what fascinates me? I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I just homeschool my kids. And I was like, and that's it. Like, my relationship with my kids, it fascinates me because being a parent, I have seen how God parents me while I parent my kids. Yeah. And the whole thing is fascinating to me because, so I'll give you an example. So yesterday I was working through a school thing with my kids, and my 5-year-old was being, I don't want to do this, and we had some conflict going on, and I got down and at her eye level and I said, I am not trying to be a mean mom. I need you to trust me, and I know what's good for you, and what's good for you is to do this, and I'm seeing the big picture, and I know this is not what you want to do, and I know this is hard. I'm here with you. And like the whole, as I'm, we had our moment, and I sat with her and we did it. And then I was doing dishes and I thought, God just like taps me on the shoulder. He's like, hey, I see the big picture. Yeah. I'm not trying to be mean. Wow. I know what's best for you. And it's constantly in my parenting, he's just tapping me on the shoulder, being like, hey, as your dad, And so another thing, my 2-year-old is like queen of tantrums right now. They're happening a lot. And it happened on the way here. And I just felt like I'm just tired. She's just screaming and she just wants control. That's what it boils down to, is she wants control. And if she was in control of her life, that'd be a very scary thing right now. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sit with you in this tantrum. You can kick and scream. I'm not letting you have control because that would be bad for you. Yeah. And then God just taps me on the shoulder and it's like, hey, you're throwing tantrums to me all the time too. Yeah. In prayer life, and just being like, God, why? And I don't understand. And so I'm just, you're right. You sit with me through my tantrums. And then just the last thing, I'm going to have a walker soon. I mean, maybe not. He's going to be crawling. I have a 5-month-old. But I did this with my 3 other kids when they started to learn to walk. And I would just like clear the path for them. Here they come. I don't want them to trip. So I would just move a ton of stuff out of the way, and they just walked along. They had no idea that I was clearing the path. And I felt like God was just like, I do that for you every day. Like, you don't even know all the things that are coming, and I'm clearing your path. You're going through your day. And so I've learned to thank God for all the things that I don't know that He's doing. That's really because as a parent, I feel that with my kids. I'm just like, you don't even know all the things I did for you to make that thing happen.
That's really cool.
So that whole relationship is fascinating. And my kids know. My kids say, like, when I'm parenting them, they're like, God's going to parent you? Like, is God going to deal with you on this? Because I talk to them about their attitudes. God deals with mommy on her attitude. And they're like, is God going to deal with you on that? Oh, yes, He is. Yes, He is. So that's been something pretty fascinating to
really
me.
Cool.
That's great. Ali, this has been awesome.
Thank you.
So good.
So much.
We really appreciate you. And I know this is going to be good for other people. Yeah. I said you're a big deal at the beginning because I know there's a lot of people who see you as a big deal. Oh. And I don't mean because you're just like this amazing person. I mean because of the example that you're giving.
Yeah.
And that carries a lot of weight. That carries a lot of people respect you because of the example that you give and the faithfulness that you show. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan and Ian.